Good morning and welcome back to the channel. Now today I've come out for a little bit of a recce along my local river down here in Devon, which is the River Otter, and for two reasons really. One, because as I've mentioned in previous videos, at the moment I need to stay close to home as my wife's due to give birth any day, and in fact she's overdue. And the other is because I've had my eye on a few spots along the river down here for a couple of years, well since moving to Devon really, that I've wanted to invest some time in and I haven't. And I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to go out and just check them out, see what we can find. And I really wanted to bring you guys with me. Now, I don't know what we're going to find, if anything. I don't even know if this video will make it onto YouTube if we don't find anything at all. But I'm hoping that we'll find some of the classic things that you do find along the River Otter. So along here, I photograph all sorts, beavers. In fact, I saw some otters in my village the other week, dippers, kingfishers, and it's the kingfishers really that I'm after today. I've got some ideas for this winter to start some, was that a little grebe? Is that it? It's a little grebe, oh, it just dived. So that's cool, nice little grebe. But it's the kingfishers that I'm after really. I really want to start a project this winter with some hides for photographing local kingfishers. And I thought I'd come out today and just try recce a few locations, see if we can find some. So that was really cool. Just after I finished introducing this video and talking to you guys, I heard and saw a dipper just fly upstream, and I managed to follow it, and it's just landed just upstream around this corner from me. Just had a kingfisher too. I think what I'm going to try and do, because I haven't photographed dippers here before, I think what I'm going to try and do is get a little bit closer and see if I can get you some footage first and foremost, because I have quite a few dipper images. And if I get some footage and I'm happy with it, I'll try and capture some images. I have no idea how I'm going to get closer to them though. It's always really nice to see. Finding a subject that you found before, but in a new location, a subject you haven't found before, it doesn't really matter. It's just recceing these new locations and finding what you're looking for. In fact, I wasn't really looking for dippers. I was just hopeful for anything. But the fact it's a dipper is a really good start to the morning. Now I thought it would be a good idea, while sat here waiting to see if the dippers come back, to talk to you about my top tips for anybody who's just getting into or thinking about getting into wildlife photography. Now, this is a subject that I could talk about all day, and I'm going to try and keep it as concise as possible, so I've narrowed it down to my top 5 tips. Now, tip number 1 has got to be understanding your subject. Now, I don't necessarily mean understanding how many legs a brown hare has, how many wings a dipper has, stuff like that. I kind of mean understanding their behavior, and there's ways in which you can do this. Of course, you can go out in the field and you can try and find this subject and spend a lot of time out and about looking, but there's also things that you can do to help speed up the process. For example, researching your subject, whether it's online or by using books. Now, I love these types of books. This is a field guide to the animals of Britain, and it's been really, really helpful for me since starting wildlife photography. I also love it because the illustrations are just brilliant. But it kind of tells me all about brown hares, what time of day they're more active, where I'm likely to find them, and it runs through all of the animals of Britain just telling me that. So I find things like that really, really useful. It also means that if you understand your subject through researching it, you're going to be able to then adapt your fieldcraft based on the subject you're wanting to photograph. For example, I will use different techniques when I'm out in the field trying to photograph brown hares to what I would use when I'm out by the river trying to photograph dippers. And if you can understand your subject and their behavior, then you're able to read signs when you're out in the field, adjust your fieldcraft, and that's going to give you a better chance of getting those nice encounters and coming away with some nice behavioural images. Another really good way of getting to understand your subject, and especially in your local area, is investing in a trail camera. Now, for anybody who's thinking about getting into wildlife photography or who has just got into wildlife photography, these are a great investment. I think I picked mine up for about £45 on Amazon, and they've been brilliant. I just set them up in new locations in my local area, and it'll basically tell me if the wildlife's there. And if I've got a particular subject, say a roe deer, that's going into a particular field at the same time of day, roughly every single day, then I know it's worth me getting into that field before that time, and there's a very good chance I'm going to get an encounter with a roe deer. These also come where you can put date and time stamps on them, and I think that's really, really useful. It just means that you don't need to go out and sit in the field for hours on hours, day after day, hoping to find your subject. I still do that, and it's really, really fun, but I like to do it knowing that my subject is in the area, and using something like a trail cam is just going to help you find that out. Now, we've talked about understanding your subject, but my next tip has got to be understanding your camera and your camera settings. Now, all cameras are different, so of course I can't tell you about what settings you need to be using for your particular camera, but just having a fiddle around of an evening when you're sat there and it's dark and there's nothing you can do, just running through all of the settings. Using YouTube for your particular camera model is a really, really good way of understanding the settings as well. There's so many great videos out there that will run you through settings for your particular camera. But I think the best way really is just getting out there and just shooting away. Now, this doesn't have to be photographing wildlife, this could be photographing anything, and just playing with different apertures, different ISOs. So often when I'm doing my beginner wildlife workshops, we just run through all of those settings, talking about exposure compensation, shutter speed, and also just knowing whether your camera is capable of doing particular things. So a really good thing to do, say if you've got a pet like a dog or a cat, is just to photograph that animal on a different F number and go all the way through and just see how the image changes when you load them into the computer, and do exactly the same thing with your ISO range. And that kind of thing will give you a really good understanding of your camera. And then it becomes like second nature. The more you understand your camera, the quicker you can respond when you're out in the field, and the less, I would say, dud images you're going to come away with. Doesn't always work like that. We all make mistakes, and I'll come on to that in a moment. But understanding your camera is really, really going to help you when you're out in the field. Now, my third tip, and this is probably my top tip really, is just shoot locally. Now, I know that I go off and I photograph things on the Isle of Mull or wherever, and that's fine, but when you're first starting out in wildlife photography, it's a really, really good idea to have a handful of locations that are really, really close to home that you can get to really, really quickly. Now, not only does it mean that you're going to be able to visit these places more because they're closer, it also means you're going to be able to understand how the light falls in these locations, how busy they get at different times of day with walkers, runners, cyclists. For example, I've got locations down here in Devon that I only photograph in the summer months, first thing in the morning, and they only really work at sunrise for backlit images. If I try and photograph them in the evening, then there's really, really cluttered, messy backgrounds. And if I try to photograph there in the middle of the day, the place just gets too busy with people. So being able to actually spend time at these locations and understand all of these different factors is really, really going to help you when coming away with good images. It also means that if you're sat at home watching something like Emmerdale and the light suddenly starts to change, that you're able to just jump on your bike or jump in the car, and within 10 minutes you're at your location and you're able to capitalize on that light. Now, if your best location is 6 hours away, then you're going to miss that opportunity. Now, my next tip is something that has taken me quite a long time to really understand, and that's just that you're going to need a lot of patience in this. Dipper's just come back and landed right in front of me. Yeah, that's awesome. It's raining quite a lot now as well, which is classic Devon. Forecast was no rain and sun, and now we've got loads of rain. Okay, I'll keep this one quick. Now, you could have done all the research you want on your subject. You could have picked up endless amounts of footage on your trail camera, but you're still going to need patience when it comes to wildlife photography. It's just the way it goes. Wildlife is unpredictable. That is about the only predictable thing about wildlife, is that you just can't predict it. Now, I've spent so much time out in the field and come away empty-handed, and I appreciate that channels like this, like mine, aren't really a true representation of that, but I promise you, I have shot so many YouTube videos that haven't made it onto this channel because my subject didn't turn up. And I often think about posting those videos to show the people that are just starting out that we all fail, but I don't know whether they would make good viewing. I guess I shouldn't even use the word fail, because every single moment out in nature is just a special one anyway. But you do need to have patience. You also need to be prepared to make loads of mistakes. I make mistakes all the time when I'm out in the field. In fact, I made one this morning when I saw a kingfisher fly upstream and I took a step too far, and before I could put my tripod down to get you guys some footage, it flew off. This is just what happens, but you learn more from those mistakes than you do all of the things you get right, if that makes sense. So I've learned more from what I've done wrong in my images than what I get right. And now I would say that I always critique my images objectively. So I will look at them and I'll say, what don't I like about this image? And that to me is a really, really good way to learn, by just looking at your images and saying, what's wrong with it? Of course, you don't want to be too harsh on yourself and you just want to enjoy it, which brings me on to my next tip. But you have to look at things objectively, and by doing that and finding the flaws in your own images, and by finding the flaws in your field craft and how you go about finding your subjects when out in the field, if you look at what you're doing wrong and you're happy to accept that you're getting things wrong, then you're going to get better quicker. Now, my fifth and final tip has to be just have fun. It sounds corny, I know, but there's reasons that I say this. And one, look, ultimately, that's probably why you got into wildlife photography in the first place, because you just wanted to be out in nature having a good time. And I meet wildlife photographers all too often that have probably lost sight of that a little bit, and it becomes about the images. Now, I would be lying if I said that the images weren't important to me, but it's not realistic to think that you're going to come away with the best encounters every time or award-winning images every time. Those times are great when they happen, but it's all about just getting out there and just shooting as much as possible, capturing as many images as possible, and that is going to be the best way to learn. Just looking at all of the images that you've captured from that session and saying, yeah, maybe the light was a bit too bright, but I understand now that there's no point in me photographing a kestrel against the sun in the middle of the day because it's come out underexposed and I can't see any details. Whatever it is, you've just got to be out there just trying it. I've heard people say that they don't want to go out photographing because it's raining. Some of my best images have come photographing in the rain. Again, I don't want to go out photographing because it's too bright and it's the middle of the day, I won't see anything. You just never know. I'm out in the middle of the day now. It is, in fact, 2:15, and I've been out since about 11 o'clock, and I had some really cool encounters with kingfishers and dippers this morning. So it's all about just getting out there and just taking as many images as you can and just having fun. Because if you're having fun, the chances are you're going to stay in the field for longer, and the chances are you're going to continue doing this as a hobby for much, much longer. Now, those are my 5 tips. I realise I put a couple of extra tips into those main 5, but again, like I said at the start, I could go on about this all day. Look, I want to stress that I make mistakes. I'm not perfect at this. I'm learning all the time. I still watch YouTube videos where people are giving advice and tips as well. But I just wanted to help those people that are just starting to pick up a camera and just give you some of the tips and tricks that I've learned along the way. Right, I'm going to get back to seeing if I can find some dippers and start walking home. I think I've got about a 4-mile walk left and it's going to get dark in a couple of hours, so going to head off and see what I can find. This is awesome. I have to whisper, but I've just left the dippers and I've just straight away stumbled across a buzzard and it's right in front of me. It's just on this tree up here. Oh, this is so cool. I've switched to the 500 lens and I'm getting some really nice footage. What a day this is turning into. So the buzz has just flown off, but wow, that was just awesome. So it was just perched in a tree on this side of the river, just over here, one of these dead trees. And then I shouldn't do that because I'm useless at pointing out things whilst looking at the camera. But it was basically on one side of the river when I first stumbled across it. I started filming thinking it'd fly away. And after a couple of minutes it did, but it landed on a tree even closer on this side of the river. And it was there for a good like 5-10 minutes. And it's just flown off and I'm just going to leave it and carry on heading upstream to hopefully find some kingfishers. So although I didn't manage any particularly good images, I got these ones, but they're okay. I had the teleconverter on and I quickly switched to the 500 just to give me that extra reach, but nothing special, but I don't care. Really, really cool to see. And buzzards tend to stick to the same spots, so it could well be worth me coming to check this out again and giving it another go. So that's another location and another subject banked this morning. Now, kingfishers. I've seen a few just darting up and down. So I've got to head upstream because that's the way back home. So I'm going to keep walking upstream and hopefully we manage to find some kingfishers.